I decided that rather than go into Professor Fraser's lectures in week 10, I would just do a short video to wrap up this topic of plant response to pathogens. So we ended here talking about the various steps of the hypersensitive response that start with the pathogen being detected. And then the plant has enzymes that produce nitric oxide and also some superoxide and hydrogen peroxide. And those have the result of resulting in a thickening of the cell wall and also ultimately the death of the cells that have been affected. And then another part that we didn't talk about much in lecture is that other cells in the plant are signaled about the pathogen. Here's a nice picture of a cell that's been infected, and you can see the thick cell wall that's developing around the edge of it there. And remember, that makes kind of a trap, an island here that the pathogen gets trapped in, and then that cell dies. Now, thinking about the way that this results in a signal going to the rest of the plant, this process is called systemic acquired resistance, or SAR, here on the figure. And so here you can see the stuff we talked about. Here's a pathogen. It's coming in, and this AVR gene product is binding to an R gene product in the plant. So the plant recognizes the pathogen. That starts the hypersensitive response, HR, and as part of that, this systemic acquired resistance signal goes throughout the plant. And then in other areas, like is shown down here in this leaf, you get the expression of genes that help the plant prepare to defend against that pathogen. So when you see something like this, you know, a signal going from one part of the plant and affecting other parts of the plant, then you should right away think about a hormone. So there's definitely a hormone involved in this. It's thought that it is a derivative of salicylic acid, and you can read more about that in your textbook. So we started filling this out here, and we talked about innate immunity, things that the plant are born with, but the hypersensitive response is what we've been talking about, and that's an example of acquired immunity. It only happens once there's exposure to the pathogen. So we can ask 4 questions about it. First of all, what cells does it take place in? Well, in the plant, all cells can mount the hypersensitive response. So what is involved for recognizing the pathogen? Well, it's that interaction between the R genes in the plant and the AVR genes in the bacteria. The response is the hypersensitive response and ultimately cell death. And the final question, is it systemic? Does it affect the entire plant? And the answer is yes, with that systemic acquired resistance. So this is a clicker question I would have asked you in class, and if you want to right now, you can pause the video and try and answer this, and then resume it, and you can hear my solution. All right, so let's look at our choices here. So the first 2 are pretty easy to eliminate because of the problem here that they both say, talks about a plant AVR gene. And that's wrong. Those AVR genes, those are the genes that are in the pathogen that allow for recognition. So there's also a problem with D, because here it's the question about the term virulent versus avirulent, right? So here it says that a pathogen is virulent if it produces a protein that is recognized by the plant R gene. Virulent means it will cause disease. And if the plant can recognize it, then it's not going to be able to cause disease. It's going to get the hypersensitive response again instead. And so that's why we end up with C here as the best answer. A pathogen is avirulent, it does not cause disease, if it produces a protein that is recognized by a plant R gene. So the hypersensitive response is some sort of a small-scale response, usually to a bacteria or fungus or viral infection. But what about something like this, an herbivore that just is going to come in and chew away large parts of the plant? Well, there's a response to this too. So the damaged tissue releases a hormone, and in this case it's called cysteamine. And cysteamine is neat. It's actually a small polypeptide, and that travels out of the damaged leaf to other parts of the plant. And the cysteamine induces expression of defense genes, and one of the most interesting classes of these is proteinase inhibitors. So a proteinase is an enzyme that breaks down proteins, and animals have these as part of their digestive system. So if the plant produces a molecule that is a proteinase inhibitor, it prevents that animal from breaking down the proteins. And here you can see some caterpillars that were both fed the same diet, but those little tiny yellow ones down at the bottom, they were treated with a protease inhibitor, and that causes this real inhibition of their growth. So this may sound a little bit like the hypersensitive response. There's some things in common, but it's a different response to a different type of pathogen, an herbivore in this case. All right, so make sure you can distinguish between those.